friends. Welcome to episode 314 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 18th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Bluesky at SLU Podcast or on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United and the email address, schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Friends, I'm so excited. We are in for a treat. We've got Barbara Lawrence here, who teaches and is a school librarian in Santa Cruz Public Schools, and is going to share with listeners today a very exciting opportunity. And I'm hoping that everybody will tune in and see what they can do to make this possible. So, Barbara Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here. I'm a giant fan.
Well, Barbara, you reached out to me because there's something very exciting happening on March 30th to benefit all the schools in the Santa Cruz County. And I'm hoping that you'll share this with us because I can't think of a more exciting way to get involved with building out the libraries in a county.
Yeah, so like all school libraries, we don't have enough budget to buy all the beautiful books we want. And so I saw this fabulous film about children's books last year at a school library convention. And I thought, number one, we have to bring this film to Santa Cruz because we want everybody to see it and know how important children's books are and how important librarians are because we bring those books to our students. And then I thought, well, this would be a great way that we could raise money for our school libraries. And third, I just wanted to do something in community where everybody comes together to celebrate it, rather than watching on our computers at home, like we're all there together to say, children's books are magical. And right now we're in a golden age of children's books. So this film focuses on three of my favorite children's book creators, Mac Barnett, Juji Morales, and Christian Robinson, and really looks at how they create these wonderful books that teach us empathy, that are diverse, that show us inclusion, that show us windows and mirrors.
Well, and the creator of this film is also renowned for her gift of creating films. So could you speak to a little bit to that as well?
Joanna Rudnick is an Emmy Award-winning documentarian. And when I reached out to her to see if we could show this, she said yes. She gave us the licensing. She's not charging us. And she's driving down. She lives up near San Francisco in Berkeley. She's driving down for a Q&A afterwards. There'll be a couple librarians on stage, and we'll be able to just ask her about her journey in finding out about books. She has a couple kids, and so she was just struck by what story time did for her family, the quiet time when everything stops. And through that, she met these three fabulous authors who she documents. But I also want to say she's unearthed some lovely archival footage about the beginning of children's books. Goodnight Moon, A Snowy Day. And so she's included a history of it just to show us what they do for our kids.
So I'm really excited. There are a couple things we can do here. Obviously, joining that group of people who get to watch this amazing viewing on March 30th. And those are the lucky people who get to join in this communal shared experience of viewing this and then being part of that larger audience. And friends, so we have tickets for anybody who lives within sort of a driving distance to Santa Cruz to be able to participate in that. And the tickets are on sale. We're going to put that link in the show notes, but there is also an opportunity for those of us who do not live in driving distance to not only contribute and share in this wonderful fundraising effort, but also be able to view this documentary on our own.
Right. So the tickets are 100% donation. So anybody anywhere in the world can buy a ticket, and that money, even if you can't come see the film with us on March 30th, that money will go right into the hands of school librarians. We're partnering with Bookshop Santa Cruz, and they are just making this all happen for us. So 100% of the proceeds. So yeah, please feel free to go buy a ticket, and that money will come to us. Tickets, you can buy one for $20. You can buy $100, $500. I think you get a cute bag from Bookshop Santa Cruz the more you pay, and a sticker. But it really is just a way for us to raise money for our Santa Cruz public school libraries.
I love it. And then, friends, we will include links because this movie is available. You can purchase the license to show it in your neighborhood, in your school library. And it's a beautiful, sweet story. And I'm very excited anytime you want to promote the importance of children's books, and especially the librarians who are going to make sure that those get into the hands of our students. I am so grateful. Barbara Lawrence, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I truly wish that you have every, good thing happen when it comes to that turnout and overall with this fundraising that you're doing for your schools.
Thank you so much, Amy. Can I add that anybody is welcome to contact me if they want to do this in their own district and do that. And then just a real shout out to Bookshop Santa Cruz, the owner, Casey Coonerty. She's like, yes, we want to do this. Thank you for bringing us. County Office of Education's partnering. The Humanities Institute at the University of California is partnering. So we've just been blessed by having all these people come together to help support us.
Well, and forgive me, but let's remember who brought them all together, and that's the amazing power of a school librarian. Because when school librarians realize that our community resources, we really are that glue. We are the ones who start to pull all of those things together and make something happen. You literally pulled this out of thin air. You created something that didn't exist before, and all of a sudden this event is happening because of you. So congratulations in advance, and I am so glad we were able to connect. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Thank you, Amy. This is a great opportunity.
And now for today's episode, Texas FReadom Fighters and my conversation with Becky, Calzada, and Carolyn Foote. Friends, I'm so excited. We've got the Texas FReadom Fighters here. This is an absolute thrill. Becky and Carolyn, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Becky, you and I just recorded an episode 310, Mentoring and Retaining School Librarians. I am so excited to have this opportunity to focus on the important work that you've been doing since 2021 with the Texas FReadom Fighters.
Yep, I'm excited to share and excited to be here with my colleague and partner here, Carolyn.
So, Carolyn, I was really hoping that we would have an opportunity to connect. I wanted to showcase the Texas FReadom Fighters, and that conversation would only be possible if you were able to join us today.
So I'm Carolyn Foote, and I'm thrilled to be here with my colleague, Becky, and share the work that we've been doing as a coalition, an informal group called the Texas FReadom Fighters.
So, I guess before we even dive in, Becky, would you remind us, what do you do by day? You do have a day job, which keeps you very occupied. But I think it's relevant because for both of you, you have lives. So, Becky, would you introduce us and remind us what you do every day?
My name is Becky Calzada, and I am, in my day job, I'm the district library coordinator for Leander ISD. So I've been in this role for 15 years now, and I've been in public education for about 38 years now, I think, as a librarian probably since 2000. I also am the ASL president for 24-25. I am also a mom of 2 daughters and a son-in-law now, and then I've got 2 grandkids. Who are in 4th and 5th grade. So, lots to be busy, but just so involved, also involved in our state association, TLA. So I do a lot of advocacy work. So advocacy work is not new to me. So it does, because I've had a lot of practice with it, it just seemed kind of natural to just kind of flow into this job. So
ready or not, here it comes. It seems like Texas really was a hot spot for a lot of the initial attacks on librarians, both public librarians and school librarians. So, Carolyn Foote, give us your story. I know that it's going to come up a little bit later on, but tell us, what do you do and what has been your role in school librarianship?
I'm Carolyn, and I was a school librarian for 29 years in a suburb of Austin, and I was the district librarian for the last 14 of that. And prior to that, I taught English for 10, 11 years. So I have 40 years in education. And I retired just when this moment was ramping up, not because of it. It was just a coincidence. But I call myself rewired because I'm actually both doing advocacy for our grassroots group, not unpaid advocacy, but I've also worked for various nonprofits in the education space since I retired. So I wear a lot of different hats, but advocacy was really a normal part of my job. It was something I was always interested in, and telling the stories of libraries and how to get people on board, because funding is always an issue, especially in states like Texas. While we have had a pretty healthy library population here, overall, I was in a smaller school district, so cuts can happen more frequently there. And so it was just something that I had always paid attention to. So when this moment arrived and I had colleagues like Becky, who I knew cared, we just informally began talking about what was happening.
I guess I didn't even realize that you were already in the business of advocacy. You just had to sort of direct that energy in a slightly different direction. It was still coming at your collections and the people who worked in the spaces, but rather instead of funding, it's now because of the content on our shelves.
Exactly. And right when I retired in 2021, we were starting to see, Texas had passed a CRT, anti-CRT type bill, critical race theory, and we were starting to see some book challenges to some picture books about race. And so we were sort of braced for that conversation, and then circle around to the fall of that year, in Texas, when a Texas representative, Matt Krause, sent a letter to school districts around the state with an attached list of over 800 book titles, asking them to see if they own these books or any others that might cause shame or guilt around race or sex. And that list, we didn't anticipate that happening at all, but we were shocked to see so many LGBTQ titles on that list, and titles about sexual health and student rights and other things. But, we were kind of braced for this conversation about books about race at that point. So that was a big shift in what was happening really, that really started in Texas and maybe Florida.
So I'm fascinated because the Freedom Fighters is, at its core, a state organization. It is the Texas Freedom Fighters. And I've always sort of called it the Freedom Fighters because in my head, you are a national organization. And forgive me, because I have perhaps been presumptuous in mistaking Texas leadership in this effort as one that in many ways you speak on behalf of so many of us who are struggling. So while we are talking about the Texas Freedom Fighters, the fight that you are having has this spillover effect of giving voice and the spotlight to what other people are experiencing in their states, perhaps on a much smaller level, but still those attacks resonate and ripple across the country.
And yes, we didn't know we would end up, but we become advocates for people all over the country pretty early on.
Yeah, I think some of it has to do also too that we're pretty connected. We've always been pretty connected as librarians. When I think back to October of 2021, when we launched that hashtag takeover, a lot of the book attempts at book banning were really kind of centered in Texas. It was a bit of a hotbed. In fact, we were kind of dealing with things here in my school district with just the language arts books that were adopted because we were in the middle of an adoption for language arts. And I think back to when the initial challenges happened and we were watching videos going viral and people bringing props and telling librarians names, that we would text a lot, Carol and I and a couple of their librarians, and say, like, why is this happening? Why are people just really like bashing us? And what is it they don't understand what we do, kind of thing. We saw it as, is there an opportunity there? Because all of a sudden it just came out of nowhere, right? I think the thing that makes me kind of reflect on this too is that we kept thinking like people were going to come and help us, right? Because we would ask for our state association, we'd ask our national association. And I think people honestly thought back in 2021 that this was just going to kind of pass over. And it never did. And so when we launched that Twitter hashtag takeover, asking everyone to share, a book that they loved and, what it meant to them as a reader, that it really kind of showed us in such a big way that people were looking for hope, that people were wanting to hear about what books can do for people, because that's the part of the conversation that nobody talks about. There is conversation focused around a few books that are maybe a problem in a certain area, a certain community, and we're not ever really here to discuss, one specific book. We are here to talk about the credentials of librarians. We are here to discuss the impact that books can have, the resources, the lack of access for resources when things are removed, reminding people that the school library might be the one place for a reader to have access to materials, because I think there's this myth that, we can just buy a book. There's this assumption that people have the funds to purchase, or there's even an assumption that there's a public library nearby. And in a state like Texas, it's so big and there's so many rural areas. The school library is the one place where that might be the only access point for that student to have resources and books and that sort of thing too. So.
Absolutely. Well, and I think because, I've said this, everything is so much bigger in Texas. When you start putting things out, it isn't hard to imagine why Texas has, the Texas FReadom Fighters became, in my mind, the national organization of school librarians fighting this fight. And true to school librarians and librarians everywhere, making those resources accessible to everybody, you have created a website which, for many people, is the place to go when everything hits the fan and the book banning comes home to their schools and their neighborhoods. The two of you are the front-facing members of a larger group of individuals who make up the Texas FReadom Fighters. Can you give our listeners who are tuning in right now an idea of how many school librarians and other inspired individuals are working behind the scenes every day to fight against the actions to ban books on the library shelves in Texas?
We started out as a slightly bigger informal group, and of course not knowing we would be going 4 years later, and also just through personal difficulties, our leadership has winnowed down. However, when you ask that question, how many librarians are fighting behind the scenes? Every librarian. I consider every act of courage, no matter how small, whether it's only defending the policy or examining your policy, ordering a book, that doing your research before ordering it to make sure that you're buying a material that's effective for your school. Those are acts of courage right now, as well as things we're doing like speaking out publicly and doing interviews. It ranges the gamut. So I think all of us are freedom fighters and defenders of intellectual freedom, which I have to say in this political moment is so, so important. And those little acts of courage as well as large ones are really crucial.
Well, and I think we're definitely going to be talking about the fact that there was a possibility that some of this could have simmered down. And unfortunately, it has gone completely in the opposite direction due to our recent election. There has been no shortage of media coverage for the Texas FReadom Fighters since October of 2021. You have captured the attention of the national media, and your website includes links to these interviews, the webinars, the podcasts you've done, a very comprehensive collection of resources, which those of us who maybe we're experiencing this latent, upswell in banning and efforts to attack collections in libraries across the country, you have created this incredible resource which we can all use. And friends, we'll include a link in the show notes. The wild thing is that the coverage of what you do continues to this day. You are still getting a lot of media coverage for what you do.
So I think that the thing that's been different now is, we are still connecting a lot of people. I'm full disclosure, Carolyn manages the email every day. And so I'm very thankful for her for that. But she will, share things with me. She'll, include me in things. But I think the thing is that now we have organizations like United Against Book Bans. In Texas, we have Texans for the Right to Read. And now we have other states that have their own sort of freedom fighters of their own. I think of Florida, Freedom to Read. And there's so many others across the state because obviously, since 2021, there was a realization, I'm sure, the following year that this isn't going away. We need to do more organized work. And when I think not just about those organizations, but I even think of partners like, vendors, and there's Authors Against Book Bans and that sort of thing too. Now we're in the business of trying to connect people to information. People will ask and seek us out and say, do you know who would be good for this? Or do you have some resources for that? Or have you heard about this? So that's kind of what we do a lot of now.
And I think as far as the media coverage goes, it's sort of surreal, honestly, because things will happen and we're like, what? Like this is happening because, in doing this work, it just feels like we're ordinary librarians doing this work. And, for me, since I'm retired from a school, I have the freedom to be able to speak up on behalf of others. I have the freedom to go to the Texas Capitol when I want to. And it's become a larger in life, like it's my full-time unpaid job, really. But I think that we're very conscious all the time that we are representing a whole host of librarians and that we have to be, clear on what we're trying to communicate, strategic, caring. It's really not about us. The media just gives us the opportunity to help tell people's stories and to help connect more people to the cause of supporting intellectual freedom. And so I always tell people, and Becky is the same, we take any interview we get asked to do, whether it's a high school student, whether it's a college student working on a dissertation, pretty much any time someone asks us for an interview, we do it because you don't know who each interview will reach and you don't know who it will bring into the fold to help them have a better understanding of what's happening.
I also think, too, now that we've been doing this for several years, I remember Carolyn early on saying, it's so important for us to create artifacts of the time, and in lots of ways, these interviews, whether it's a paper that's being a podcast, somebody's going to look back on these things and it's going to tell a story of what's happening. And really for us, it's not the story about what we are doing. I mean, we are again, the front-facing people, but we want to be the conveyors of the stories that we hear from the people that are in the trench, but also too, because they are unable to share for fear of their job or retribution, whatever. This is going to be a big marker of the time because we know that these are unprecedented times and that they're very challenging to live through right now.
I think that fear actually is going to get worse because we're already seeing some retribution kind of from the federal level. We're certainly, I'm concerned for academic librarians who maybe haven't been in this fray as much, but with the sort of crackdowns on college content, university content, we're really going to be in sort of a very fractious and difficult moment. So, we also want people to know there are resources like the Office of Intellectual Freedom where people can actually make a phone call and, have someone respond to them. Texas has its own hotline. Some states are in the process of working on theirs, I believe. So just knowing that there is support out there. And of course, a lot of times what we do is we're sort of a back-end conduit we try to help people find the resources they need or connect with the people who can help them better than we can, because we want to be, we're professionals in the field, so there's a certain amount of trust in that.
No, absolutely. And friends, the Freedom Fighters website is a fantastic resource. You especially include, examples of how to do everything. And, I love when a librarian pulls this all together for me. It's nicely offered up to us in terms of speaking at a school board meeting, writing letters of support, reaching out opportunities to really speak out when it comes to what's happening in our neighborhoods. But you've given us at least a starting point for us to get those conversations started. You've also created those lists of national organizations that are providing a lot of support to our local librarians who are finding themselves confronted with these hateful attacks on our collection and, quite honestly, on ourselves. One especially important spotlight of this courageous battle being waged by the librarians across the United States, which captured the attention of some very famous people, it resulted in the documentary The Librarians, which was featured at this year's Sundance Festival at Park City, Utah. You were both there, rubbing shoulders with very famous people. And I'm not going to lie, for those of us who were not at Park City, Utah, one of us said, "Oh my gosh, they're so lucky." And I'm thinking, no, the reason why they've been featured is because they've been attacked, vilified. The people on that stage were on the receiving end of some of the most hateful and targeted attacks. There is nothing lucky about them because they, for years, were assaulted verbally and through media and unwanted and unsolicited attention from people they had never met because they are librarians and they want to defend the students' access to books. And so while it was lovely to see you being recognized and standing up there with famous people, I also realized the other story is how much you had to withstand to be included in that rather select group of librarians.
Well, that's exactly right. And as someone who's, we've taken the role of spokespeople, we've tried to support people behind the scenes. We've weathered a few attacks of our own, though not to the extent that some of the other librarians in the film have. But, of course, we've been called names and, et cetera. It was just an honor. And our role in the film really was the filmmakers came to us and wanted to do a documentary 3.5 years ago. And then we gradually connected them with librarians in Texas and then librarians in other states. And we played a bridge role in connecting the story, but the things that the librarians in the film, and it shows, the film will be on PBS in the fall. It's touring film festivals right now. So people may get a chance to see it before the fall, but it really focuses on, in a detailed way, the stories of individual librarians in individual districts and family members sometimes, and what it's like going through this moment. But I think it's also a call to action to people to realize the level to which this has gone in a way that's really deeply un-American, in my opinion, and to get people on board with understanding the important role that school libraries play and that libraries in general play in our democracy, because I think we're at a moment where that is going to prove very, very important, this whole notion of intellectual freedom. And we used to say, Becky and I used to say, we're the canary in the coal mine, like at the beginning. We're just the start of what's going to happen.
Just being approached was like a little like surprising to us. But then I think working with her, with Kim Steiner, her team, helping to connect others, really helped us. Well, first of all, she could literally just document. She's got so much footage of just what's happened over time in the 3 years. But I think also to the movie itself at the premiere, because I think Carolyn had seen a snippet. None of us had seen anything. And so being together, watching it for the first time, I mean, there were tears, and it wasn't tears of joy. It was tears of just like, I think when you watch something compacted into about an hour-ish, of all of the things that so many professionals have endured, so much will resonate with librarians, because they will say, that happened to me, or I remember something like that similar, or somebody saying that to me. So there's a lot of feelings of emotion that kind of rise to the top. But then there's also, when you see like the impacts of what book removals do to students, because there is a character, Weston in the film, where his story is highlighted, that it just brings to the top why we do what we do, the importance of the work that we do, and not just school libraries, public libraries, but just libraries in general. You know, they are a hub for communities in terms of information. And when we think back to like the early times, you know, our forefathers wanting to have a library for everyone as a place, and they themselves didn't want to censor either. And to know that it's happening now, that it seems, I say serendipitous in that it's happening now, it's coming out now, because, I mean, we never would have thought. I mean, the movie premiered the day that the new administration published that book bans were a hoax. And so it just seemed like, wow, did this just happen? Because we are living testimony that this is happening, that there are so many professionals being targeted, attacked, not feeling safe. But to be in a theater, in a room full of people that are not just librarians, that clapped in applause, stood up, just is heartwarming. And we've seen that so far every time it's been shown. It was just recently here in Austin at South by Southwest, so it made its Texas premiere, which made it special because this is like the OG spot for censoring and that sort of thing too. But like Carolyn said, it will make its way around through the film festival crowd. So I would say, you know, if you follow the librarians on either Instagram, sign up for their updates and they will post where it'll go next. So hopefully it'll make its way across the country.
Well, and I'm thinking about watch parties. I mean, it is, but I also know, I mean, this is going to be incredibly emotional for those of us. I have friends who have lost jobs. I have friends who have been reassigned to places where they might not do as much, to impact their community. I have friends whose lives have been absolutely turned upside down because of what happened, and it's been documented in this film. And I really feel like I'm going to be just bringing the box of Kleenex with me to the film theater, because I'm going to sob, ugly cry, when you realize how much I have not had to withstand, but those who do the job I do every day have, and really just what a humbling experience it is to see what happens when one of us comes under the scrutiny of these hate organizations. We find ourselves in 2025, and we've sort of alluded to this because things really did take a turn in, once the inauguration happened and the new administration had its footing. It seems like you are not going to fade quietly into history. Your organization has just become all the more important because you are very much needed now more than ever. Can you give us a sense, you've already started to talk a little bit about this, how the Texas FReadom Fighters has continued to evolve over the years, especially in light of what the next 4 years are going to bring?
Well, I think everyone is feeling this sense of the need for community, but also the need to work smarter, to work in collaboration. And I find that what we're doing much more often now is working across groups in a Texas coalition of parents, students, library organization, and librarians to be more coordinated about how we're responding to things and keeping our awareness going. But also in national coalitions, I find that we're both in situations where we're now in these broad national conversations about, rapid response to various things or long-term response and building more capacity. And so I feel like other than also we've gotten more into, especially I have since I'm retired, more into legislative work, physically going up to the legislature, and rallying some people. But so I think our work has shifted off of more of our social media cheerleader presence. And of course, some of that has to do too with the collapse of Twitter and us moving to a new platform. And thankfully, Bluesky, with its group ability, allowed us to gather a lot of followers pretty quickly, because that's one of our worries, moving platforms. But still, it's a different community of people. And so we're just getting our footing with that. But I also think the strategic behind the scenes work right now for all of us is so important to moving the issues we care about.
Yeah, I think we're really trying to just listen for opportunities, trying to coordinate with people. But I also think too, we also really look for opportunities where to share in non-like groups. So yes, we do speak at conferences with librarians, and we love to do that too. But we also know that we're kind of preaching to the choir. So we want to get outside those circles. And so we will look for opportunities to try to share at South by Southwest, or try to, get outside the circles if there's opportunities, whether it's local. I mean, I know I've spoken to the Rotary Club here in my area. Carolyn's spoken to a couple of groups here in the Austin area. So I think it also, this speaks to though that the actions that people do don't have to be really big and on a national scene, that so much can be done just to influence in your area and your community, and that those actions are especially important. So no one should ever negate that those don't have impact, because they do.
Yeah, I can recall recently a family friend of my parents was at a holiday gathering and said, "Oh, I heard at some club meeting about, these awful books in libraries, and I know you're a librarian. Can you tell me more?" And we had a long conversation about it. But sometimes those one-on-one conversations where you have the time and the leisure to break down the issue and help them understand, I think everybody can agree on certain materials that would never be appropriate in a school library or public ever. But there's also the slippery slope of censorship. I don't know if you know that video game. I never can remember the name. My son always teases me about it. It's like a ball avalanche, and it starts rolling downhill, and it picks up people all the way down the hill till it's like this giant ball of little cartoon policemen and child caregivers and anyway. It reminds me of that game. It's the ball has rolled downhill and it's collecting everything in its wake. I just saw a story about Tennessee. The school district removed 570 books due to their new state law. But it was books about, they published the list, and it was books about ancient Rome, history, slavery. So it was books you might expect to be on that list, and then a whole plethora of other things. And so where does it ever stop? We've reached this point of going, where does common sense come in, and where do people draw the line, and where organizations draw the line? And I know behind that list there was some librarian going, what in the world are you, why are we, what is happening? And this isn't what the law says. And it's just helping people navigate that is so hard.
Well, I like what you mentioned about, it's a lot of these opportunities may not be to large groups or crowds, but more with individuals. In a few short hours, I have our open house at my school. And one of my colleagues was like, "Oh, are you going to open house?" I'm like, "Oh, that is a given." And my banned book display, which never comes down, is right there in the front, in the foyer, when our families come in to our school. And I am ready with I have little information, little flyers about, it's an advocacy opportunity. I'm going to sit there and converse with every single person who walks through the door. We will get our superintendent, our Board of Education members. We will get the members of our community. We'll get prospective families who want to send their children to the school. And it's these connections just with individuals talking about what this space means to our school and our larger school community. But again, I don't see this as being optional for me. I have to be here because it is my one opportunity, one of my few opportunities to connect with our families, our parents, and our larger community who want to see why this space is so valuable to our students.
I love that. I used to tell my librarians when they didn't want to be there on back to school night, that's the time we should be there and be as visible as we can. And I have a great story for you about my banned books display that I had up in the 1990s when I was a baby librarian. About 4 years ago, I was on Twitter and I saw one of our former students was a state representative, had been elected. And I remember her really well. And I followed her on Twitter, and I saw her tweet that she remembered her high school banned books display, and that's why she was opposing the book banning in Texas. And I reached out to her. I was like, "I was your librarian." And she ended up becoming our staunchest advocate in the legislature last session. And so we don't know the seeds we're planting now for the future either. We really don't. And so it's why these conversations with students, with the parents, the community are so important for the future, not just for now.
Absolutely. Becky, you and I, exactly a month ago, we had a conversation on mentoring and retaining school librarians. These attacks on school librarians by book banners are determined to remove the very people that you are trying to support and keep from leaving this profession. How are you, as a district coordinator, ensuring that the very librarians of Leander School District are ready to withstand the challenges as they come?
So that's a great question. And so it definitely starts, first of all, with building a relationship with each and every one of my people. I tell people that come to work with me that, yes, I'm invested in you as a coordinator, but I'm also invested in you as a professional and as a friend. So I really work hard to build a relationship with everybody that I meet, especially our librarians. And so also remind them that there's this open door. And I say open door, obviously they're not in my space with me, but that you can call me. I give them my cell number. You can text me at a point of need because things like that happen. And of course, then I also assign them a mentor, which is important. But that said, as a group, we always have a training every year. That's part of our beginning of year procedures. It's a little bit of a deeper dive for our new people. And then what I really try to do with just the whole group as a whole is to do more scenario-based kind of learning. And I even ask them to come up with scenarios because I want them to really present some challenges that maybe I hadn't thought of or maybe something that they've experienced. And so we do a lot of that. We also have kind of a checklist of here's things to do. Just, obviously you're not going to have the script in front of you, but just kind of things to remember. The other thing that we do as a team is we have a statement to our community that shares this is how we select books in our school district, so that whether you're a librarian, a principal, a teacher, you can go to our website or they can share this list when that question comes up, because we do get that question and we're not trying to hide anything. We want to be transparent, and along with other typically asked questions like, how do you access our library catalog? So I really share those kinds of things with our people so that they can also be transparent and share with their stakeholders, with their parents, and pass it along in their newsletters and that sort of thing too. So I think a lot of the preparedness has to do with trying to be proactive, obviously, and then always reminding not just the librarians, but principals too, communicating with them as a team, an administrative team, to say and it's part of my every beginning of year. If you have any questions about book challenges, if you get a concern from a parent, here's our process. Feel free to reach out to support. I'm happy to support with communication, because I think, like we always say, that sort of interaction can be rattling, and it just depends on who the interaction's with. Most parents are pretty calm, but every once in a while you get somebody that's very just emotional. So not, coaching people in how to step up and be ready for that kind of interaction is key.
Well, and, this is really important because obviously not all of us work in large districts with a network of people who, like you, would be part of that team. So, I know that your librarians are really lucky. Yes, Becky.
Thanks. Well, and I also say this too, because the other thing that we talk a lot about too as a team is one of the things we know that's happening around right now is a lot of self-censoring. And so I really work with my team and tell them, I know you're a singleton on your campus, but we have 30 elementary people. We have 9 middle school people. We have 6 high school people. So if you're not sure, ask your colleagues. And so ask me, and let's work on this together, because what we don't want is for this to be an emotional, reactive decision. But we actually have like a little process where, like, how does this connect to our strategic plan and our guiding documents? How does this, what are the reviews on this book? And so basically it's not an informal review, but it's a way to kind of document, this is why we want this book. Maybe it was a request from a student, but just capturing those kinds of things, and it not one person feeling like they're making the decision for everybody, but that they're doing it in concert with a few other colleagues. And then they feel like, oh, okay, I am okay. Because I think the current climate is causing us to question what we're doing. And I totally understand that. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing. What's wrong is if you make a decision based on your fear. What I want is for people to make decisions that are rooted in their professional guidelines. And here's how this connects to our guiding principles for choosing books. I mean, I want those kinds of documents so that if a question comes up, we can actually say, actually, I did this work, because it's what we do. That's what our credentials are for. So.
Absolutely. Carolyn, you are retired. I love that this team that you have, this teamwork, involves somebody who has a certain, immunity about this. You have a superpower, and that is you're retired. And, I imagine that you come at this from a place where you can be as vocal as you want, because at the end of the day, you can't be reassigned to the classroom. You can't be threatened with being fired. And I imagine that it really is liberating, because it gives you that opportunity to truly speak your mind without the fear of retaliation, certainly at a professional level.
Yes, it definitely. I was not ready to retire. It was sort of COVID-related retirement, and I made a list of 3 things maybe I could do, because I did a lot of work on library design. I had a lot of expertise in that. But the other thing I wrote down was advocacy. But I didn't know any of this was going to happen. I just knew it was something, I was good at. But it has provided me with the opportunity to be the spokesperson, to do interviews. It's by choice, but today, I worked 3 hours at my paid gig, and then I called legislators for an hour. I worked on a letter for something else. I'm doing this podcast. So it really is my life, my hobby, my avocation. We listen to school board meetings over dinner. My husband's, a whole part of this. He's not retired. Yes, it's the bonus member. But someone listening out there is a retired librarian or a retired educator, or even a former librarian now in another career. just know that you have a place in this fight because you can speak up on behalf of your colleagues. And I try to be a good listener because I want to be sure I'm reflecting the zeitgeist, the things people are feeling or experiencing. But it has given me a real freedom to be able to speak up. And that's not to say it's without cost. I have someone in my former district who was requesting my emails in a FOIA like 2 or 3 years after I left. So, and then someone mentioning me at a legislative hearing, like years after I left. And so it's not without some cost, but I live in a big city too, so it's a little less scary in that regard. Retired people, get on board. We need your help.
Absolutely. Going into year 4, your political activism is not going to be able to take a vacation anytime soon. And we really sort of jumped right into this at the very beginning of our conversation because, unfortunately, there was really no time wasted by the administration to sort of make libraries and librarians we are clearly in the crosshairs of this administration. In addition to closing and shutting down many federal agencies, IMLS has effectively been shut down, and it cripples a lot of what we do at the federal level. When you realize that everything that happens at the federal level eventually trickles down to the state level, we are fully bracing for another round of book banning efforts. These individuals are nothing if not emboldened by the actions being taken by the president. What advice can you give to listeners who are tuning in, realizing that any thought that this might sort of fade into history, it's definitely not going to happen. We need to stay strong.
Take a deep breath, take care of yourself, but get prepared. Because we hear so many people who are not prepared. And there's so many proactive things that people can do. Monitoring, specifically the Office of Intellectual Freedom newsletter, so you see what's happening in other places because it might come to you. But even proactive things like writing a rationale for your display when you put up a display, having it pre-written so that if someone says something, you already have something composed that ties into your school district's mission or your public library's mission or city council's mission. For example, Moms for Liberty has started a new university, and their first course was on social emotional learning and why it's harmful. So we shouldn't be surprised if we start having attacks on books relating to social emotional learning or programming related to that. So just being aware of things that are happening external to us is also really important. Doing practice scenarios like Becky talked about, like do some practice scenarios of worst case scenarios. What would you do so that you have some plans? Public libraries tend to have a crisis plan. School librarians and schools in general don't have, other than a physical crisis plan, don't really have a crisis plan for these sort of attacks. But they're pretty coordinated when they start happening with social media and phone calls and school board. So does your district have a crisis plan for this sort of situation, or your academic library? I think there's so many things that people can do to be proactive, and it also helps because you feel like you're doing something to prepare rather than just awaiting something bad to befall you.
Yeah, I would agree. I tell my librarians is another thing that's part of our preparedness as a group, is one of the action steps for them to do is to go back, schedule some time with their principal to have a plan. When somebody comes to the librarian, what are your next steps? When they come to the principal, what are the next steps? So that they are aligned and all flowing in the same direction. I think, again, knowing that there's some sort of a plan does make a difference. I also think, too, that we need to watch our time. We need to be informed, but also be mindful of our time at the media table. We actually wrote a blog post on our Substack, which will be linked on here, about minding our time at the media table, because so much of that negative. All the actions that are happening are overwhelming, and it's just so disheartening, and it just makes you just want to just not do anything. And so it's important to be informed, but also balance that with what can I do in my area, in my corner of the world that's going to make a difference. And so I try to remind people that the work that you do is important, working with those students, because, that work is important. Thinking about the things you can do, as Carolyn said, in your community. I actually had somebody reach out to me today and said, I've been meaning to talk to you. I spoke to you a while back, and you mentioned about updating policies where only your immediate community can respond or do a book challenge. And she said, we had that conversation, and several people are not happy with us because they did that. But I think also, too, that just also shows that if you really want your libraries to be, the people that are invested in your communities to have that voice, I think that's one way to do that. So in our sense, in our area, we have taxpayers, parents of students that are in our system, that kind of thing. We're very specific. So those kind of actions, they don't ward nothing happening, but it does protect you from the outsiders that are, literally driving around the state and the country to go and just try to cause havoc and try to disrupt the work of school librarians and just disrupt access to resources of public education, really, in general. So.
Well, and you sort of started to talk about how this kind of attacks, these relentless attacks on our character and on our profession, really can be overwhelming and challenging, and recognizing that it does take its toll. I know that for many school librarians, especially those who were featured in the documentary, really had, in many cases, physical manifestations of their stressors. I was very fortunate to interview Martha Hickson, and it was very obvious that the attacks were very, very much internalized and really wreaked havoc on a librarian's wellness, and it really does manifest in physical form. So I know that this is an issue that school librarians, regardless of how many people are coming after them, it really is a concern for so many people.
Well, I was going to say, out to your point, so Martha Hickson is featured in the documentary, and what you share is absolutely right. I think it does take a toll in trying to find a way to deal and cope. It makes me think of it even when we were going through COVID and how so many people were dealing with it differently. Some people were fine, but then there were others that were literally internalizing a lot of the fear and all that was happening. And of course, on top of that, book bans were happening too. So when I think about things that people can do, I know people automatically say oh, you should get a massage, you should get a pedicure. And I'm not saying those are bad. I think those are great. But I also know that maybe that's a monetary sort of assigned sort of thing. But I don't believe that those are the only things that you can do. And I think about the work of Dr. Sandra Dalton-Smith. She talks about the 7 types of rest. And she talks about, yes, that there's mental rest where you just take a break or you get away from the screen. You talk about maybe a spiritual rest, and it's maybe if you're a spiritual person, if you go to church or you read your Bible, or maybe you have that little Zen moment or that little space where you meditate. It could be a physical break by exercising. It could be emotional where you're just talking to other person about your feelings. But then I think about creativity sort of opportunities where I'm going to get out and I'm going to doodle or draw or do a puzzle or write. So I think, and there's others, but I just think too that those, if you kind of lean into those opportunities, that helps to get your mind off of that focus. But then also, I think it also refreshes you so that you come back and you're ready to do more work, whether it's your work around book banning or just work in general. It's spring break right now, and I keep hearing, Becky, you need to rest. And yes, and I do. I'd love to take a nap, but I also am trying to make time to do the things that bring me joy, or that like going, I love to sit outside and like watch the birds that come, because we have all these different birds. I have some binoculars and that kind of thing too. But I love the piece of watching that. And so everybody has their thing. And so finding that thing, if it's to go look at art at a museum, listen to music, have your own little dance party, I think those kinds of things, it helps us to ground us and get us off that stress wheel, because it is intense and it'll manifest itself in so many ways that we've got to be taking care of ourselves.
I think also for me, being in community, like at a conference, is really hugely helpful, because there's a certain joy in being around other librarians, even in these moments. And that camaraderie and meeting authors and all of that. Or I went to South by Southwest Education. So it wasn't all librarians, but it was just all people who care deeply about education, and coming out with fresh ideas is really renewing. I also have to say there's a sort of a separate kind of rest as an advocate I've been thinking about, because I personally am deeply exhausted. Since the election, we were hopeful that things would be dying down and we could be winding down eventually. And just this, oh, wow, like we just ran a marathon and now we're gearing up for like 60 more miles. Just for myself, this is an ongoing question, but one thing I've been really trying to do is limit my social media, dive back into doing some reading, even if it's sort of philosophical texts or, texts about change or things like that, just to help me understand the moment better. But I'm still not digesting the flow. I'm not standing in the river all the time. I think that's the thing of just finding a way to step out of it. Because frankly, this happens to Becky and I both. It's like we get texts like 7 days a week for the last 4 years about something. Have you seen this bill? Have you done this? Have you spoken to this? So it's just figuring out that, things. And Becky's, those categories of rest it's an amazing way to categorize it and think about it. So thanks for sharing that.
I tell people, again, on spring break, and like everybody, I love a list. I'm a list person. But what I do for me, because I could literally clean my house and I love to organize, and you could just kind of get lost down that rabbit hole. So I have a list that's got like different quadrants. And so one list is like home and things I want to do. Another list is like work, because I know I'm going to work a little. Like I am doing a little bit of ASL stuff, and like right now, and that's okay. But it's like, and then I have another list that's, about fun. And I say fun or rest. And so I try to make my way across the different quadrants, because I want to make sure that I'm not just doing just the work or just the house, to make sure that I'm making time for me and the fun stuff. And so things like that would include like going to have lunch with a friend, going to get a facial because I'm going to treat myself, so those kinds of things. But that way I feel like I'm making time to. I've been reading right now. Actually, I went to Houston yesterday for an author event, and I finished listening to James, which was so good. Hadn't heard it. I was like, it's so good, and I was just like, oh my God, now I get what people were saying. So now I'm listening to John Green's newest book, Everything with Tuberculosis. Yeah, so I'm listening to that. So just trying to because again, I think we want to, that's just something we always love to do. But I also told some friends, it's like, I want to do that and not be interrupted or have to stop. My most favorite thing, and I'm sure you all can relate, is to be in your car listening to your audiobook and you have to get out of the car and you don't want to, right? But those kinds of things that because they're so good, make me remember, my passion for reading and why I do the work that I do. But it is a good reset for me because it gets my mind off of that other work and it gives my brain a break so that I'm, again, back fresh to do what I need to do when I'm ready.
I'm just going to say, I feel terrible. I have taken you away from your spring break. Ours isn't for another week and a half, so we still have a ways to go. But summer is coming up soon. I'd love to know, we've mentioned the importance of conferences. And for me professionally, those are the high points of my year. And I'm so excited. I know people are going to want to connect with you in person. You are both going to national conferences this summer. So let's go ahead. Becky, would you share with us, where can we connect with you this summer at a national conference?
Sure. So I am going to be going to ALA. Which is in Philadelphia this year. So I'll be there to close out my presidential year. And so we'll have a couple of meetings, meet with chapters. I will also have my president's program. And so I'm going to give everybody a little sneak peek announcement. My president's program is going to include having Ashley Hope Perez and her new book, Band Together, Our Fight for Readers' Rights. She's going to be there to share, and I'll share a little with her, have a little convo. And I think other people are going to be there. So I'm excited to have her be a part of my president's program. And then from there, I'm actually going to detour to Boston and do a little vacay there to celebrate my birthday. So I'm excited because I've never been. I was supposed to go there to Boston for the Taylor Swift concert that was going to happen during COVID, and then it got canceled. So I'm like, we're just going to hop over there and go visit for a little bit and hang out and hopefully escape the heat from here because it's usually 100 degrees here.
Sounds amazing, Madam President. We're still excited that your presidency has been fantastic. All the work you've been doing is very much appreciated. So, Carolyn, I know you're also going to be hitting the national stage, but at a different conference.
Yes, I am going to be presenting at the ISTE conference, which is in San Antonio this year, so right down the road from us, on supporting intellectual freedom through technology uses and website supports. And I hope I'll be able to flip and do both, do a little at ALA and then go to ISTE, but we'll see if that works out or not. I haven't been to ISTE since before COVID, and I used to be a regular attendee and presenter, and so I'm very excited to have the opportunity to be back and see all my friends on the tech side and techie librarians as well. So I'm very excited about that. And my upcoming and relaxing hobby, which maybe there'll be a few listeners that relate, Becky will laugh. So I've become a huge BTS fan, and that is my escape, is both Korean dramas, but also specifically BTS. And one of the BTS members is on tour this spring, and I'm going to see my first BTS concert. And so I am over the moon excited about that because it's my sort of mental break. So very excited about that.
And it's so good. I'm so excited for her. I'm actually going to go to a concert too. My daughter, her birthday is on the 12th. And so we're actually going to go to El Paso and listen to Coldplay, my first Coldplay concert. So I'm so excited because I love that band. But yeah, I love that concerts are coming back.
You know that Jen from BTS sang a song with Coldplay. Did he? Yes, he did. There's a connection here. See, we always think alike.
So I know listeners tuning in are going to want to add you to their PLN. Would you let us know, the preferred social media? Because not only you as individual leaders in our profession, but also the Texas FReadom Fighters and their social media. And friends, definitely be sure to tune in to our show notes. We'll hear this. But what is the best way to see and learn all about what you're doing in the fight against censorship?
Well, we're at FReadom Fighters. That's FREADOM Fighters on Instagram, Threads, Bluesky. We are on X still, Twitter, but we don't use it much anymore. We're just holding our account space there. I personally am Techno Library on all the platforms. You'll find my content varies a lot from library stuff to national politics, Texas politics, and BTS. So if you want to get a smorgasbord, I'm the person to follow.
All right. And Becky, I know we shared this a couple episodes ago, but let's hear it again.
So you can find me on Bluesky at BE Calzada at bluesky.social. And then I think you can find me there as ASL president, also on Bluesky too. And so we are also on X, or I'm not on X personally, but the ASL president is there. We're just kind of holding the space there. So anyway, and then I was going to say too, don't forget about following us, of course, our Freedom Fighters, that kind of thing. And then our Substack, because I think, hopefully we'll have some new content there. We have one post so far on talking about just, how you can best prepare, but also, take care of yourself. And so I'm sure there'll be more to come.
Fantastic. I am so grateful for your leadership. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. And I'm very, very grateful because we're always looking for inspiration and for people whose heart and soul is in the fight. And so thank you so much from a grateful listening audience. I hope you have a great rest of your spring break. And, this summer, I hope our paths cross.
Yeah. Thanks, Amy, for all you do and to share the good work that librarians are doing across the country. Thank you so much.
Well, it's truly a team effort, friends. Thank you so much. Friends, if you are curious to know how often your state and school librarians have been featured on the podcast, then check out the link in today's show notes for the search by title, guest, and location. My goal is to showcase school librarians from all 50 states and around the world. Take a look at the FAQs linked in the show notes to answer all of your questions about recording an episode and reach out. Make 2025 the year that you are a guest on the podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. I hope you take a look at the opportunity to support the Santa Cruz Public School Libraries and maybe even hosting a similar community event to raise funds for your school library. The topic of our next episode will be Canadian Teacher Librarian and my conversation with Aggie Glacier. I hope you will tune in.